Now that we have created our table, now let us go and try to insert some data into our table. Now to insert data into our table, so first we need to create an object of that particular employee class. We had an employee class, so let us create an object of this employee class. Let's say employee Alex equal to new employee and semicolon. And now let us create, let us give an employee ID and employee name for Alex. Our employee class has employee ID and name, so let us give an employee ID and name for Alex. Since they are private data, we need to use the setter method. So Alex dot set employee ID, and we can give like an employee ID of say 100 since it's an integer, and we can give a name, say Alex dot set employee name, and we can give a name like say Alex Berry. Okay, we have now created a data employee Alex equal to new employee, and we have created the set. We have used the setter to create a particular record or a particular object with like this record. Now I need to make sure that I send this particular data to the table. Now to save a particular object to a table, first what I need is something called as a session factory. You have to once again remember this. We'll be doing this again and again very often, so you don't have to worry. We have to create something called as a session factory. So let's say factory equal to new session. Okay, now this session factory, how do we get the session factory from? We get the session factory from config, the configuration file, annotation config dot build session factory. Build session factory. Put a semicolon. Now if it is not able to recognize session factory, so just go on top of that, and remember you have to import session factory from org.hibernate. org.hibernate. You can see the import statements right here, what's being imported from where. Till now we have imported these things. Everything's from org.hibernate. In the main method, in the classes you have to import it from java x.persistence. So remember that. In the main method here we are going to use Hibernate. Okay. Now we have had a session factory, and this session factory is built from config.build session factory, and from this session factory we have to build sessions. So we can say sess control space session, that is org.hibernate session. Remember it is not from org.hibernate.classic, not this one, it's from org.hibernate. We create something called as a session, and we give a name for the session, say session equal to factory.getCurrent session. Factory.getCurrent session. Now one thing I want you to remember is session factory is a very resource intensive object. So in our project we should not create too many session factories. We can have as many number of session objects built from this session factory, but we should try to minimize the number of session factories we create. But since this is a very simple example, I'm going to create a new session factory, and I'm going to build a session from this session factory. I'm not going to worry about the resource intensiveness. We will worry about it later on when we go into in-depth of Hibernate. Okay. Now once I created the session, now I have to associate this session with this particular object called Alex, the employee object. Now this particular object which is not associated with any session is called a transient object. Transient object means Hibernate does not know about this object, so it is called a transient object. It is transient. Now, how do I go about persisting this object? That is, how do I go about saving this object to the database table? I need to tell Hibernate, hey, this object exists somewhere. Now, to tell Hibernate, now to talk to Hibernate, to associate this particular object with Hibernate, I need to first use something called as session.begin transaction. Session.begin transaction, and come after this particular object has been created, and over here you say session.save, and here in the save method pass the object name Alex. Now what it says is session.begin transaction, you have the object, and now you are passing this particular object to the session. That means you are associating this object with the session object. That means you are associating the object with Hibernate. So this object Alex is no longer transient, it is persistent object. So that means this is going to be saved to the database. Now since we began the transaction, we need to end the transaction or commit the transaction. So say session dot get transaction dot commit. Now where exactly does it save to the database? Do you think it saves it to the database here? No, it does not save the object to the database here. It waits for the session.getTransaction.commit. This is the place where the object Alex is going to be saved to the database. You need to know it theoretically where exactly it saves to the database. It is, you can have the session.save even here, right in between this employee Alex and here also, it doesn't matter. We will see that more in depth. But you have to understand that it does not save the object in this particular line, but it saves the object in the session.getTransaction.commit. Now let us run this particular piece of code and see. Right click, run as Java application, save the file. Now you can see that it did not recreate the table, but then it did an insert into test schema. You can see the SQL statements. Insert into test schema employee, employee name and ID, and it passed these two values. Now we can go to the database perspective and check out. Open perspective, other, database development, click OK. Or you can just go and click over here. I'm going to connect once again since I restarted my computer. And now if you go to that particular table, test schema, tables, employee, right click, data, sample contents, you can see right here. Wow, we just created a table in Hibernate and we inserted a particular data into the Hibernate table. So simple to create tables and insert data.